Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to talk about the new Too Faced foundation called Do You. So if that's something you're interested in watching, you are in the right place. We are about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
Alright guys, so I will admit that when the Too Faced line first launched, I kind of was like, eye roll, another cheesy Too Faced collection. I think everybody's kind of over the whole rainbows and unicorns and, you know, like silly kind of themed type makeup that looks kind of hokey a little bit. At least I know I am. I think I have leaned a lot more towards more sleek, chic, eclectic type makeup lines, and I find myself that I'm actually leaning a little more towards kind of really sleek packaging these days. Very minimalist packaging just seems a lot more aesthetically pleasing to me. Now that may be a symptom of my old age, and maybe all of the glitter and rainbows and unicorns just aren't appealing to me anymore, but you know, I don't know. I know it was like last year that I actually got a couple of like the rainbow highlighters and a couple of the unicorn tier themed products, and you know, I thought it was kind of cool, but then it just seems like the market got really saturated really quick with that kind of hokey type of packaging and those types of themed launches, and I don't know, I guess it just got old fairly quickly with me. So when this line first came out, I kind of dumped it in that category of just very young, kind of very childish, and I didn't really, it wasn't a line that launched that I looked at it and I took it seriously. Like, oh, I have to get my hands on that. It looks like it's going to be amazing product. That's not the first thought that popped into my head when I looked at the Tutti Frutti line. I have to say my thought was more along the lines of, okay, that's cute. Probably not anything I'm going to be interested in. And honestly, guys, that pretty much is the case with this line. I have looked at the glitter lip glosses and the glittery highlighters, and, you know, it just doesn't really speak to me. The packaging doesn't speak to me. The products don't speak to me. I've looked at the two palettes, and you know, it's not a cheap palette for the cost versus the type of shadows that you get. And honestly, guys, at this point, a palette really needs to speak to me in order for me to purchase it, simply because I have a lot of palettes. But wasn't really impressed with the palettes in this particular launch either. The one thing I was very curious about was the foundation. And that's because it really claimed to be a very dewy finished foundation. Now, for those of you that don't know, Too Faced also has another foundation called the Peach Perfect Foundation. Now, this foundation is about as matte as I can tolerate. This line was actually a really neat line, and I did like a couple of products that were actually in this collection, especially the eyeshadow palettes that were released with the Peaches and Cream collection as a whole. Now, the foundation itself I liked. It had a new type of formula that was called a Comfort Matte formula. It is a very matte foundation, and if you have oily skin, of the three Too Faced foundations, that is the product I would recommend that you go with. Now, the Too Faced Born This Way, this is kind of an oldie but a goodie. This one is not as matte as this one is, but it still is a little bit of a matte. I would consider it like a demi matte. It has a very natural finish to it, not near as matte as the Peaches to Cream. So the only other foundation that they need to launch to kind of round out the finish offers in their foundation line is a dewy, radiant, brightening foundation. And that is everything that this foundation claims to be. So let's take a look at the component up close. So the packaging is cute. It's very similar to the Peach Perfect foundation. It does have that kind of squeezy tube container type look, and then of course it does have a pump on it as well. It is quite a different pump compared to the Peach Perfect foundation, but it does have a pump. So you basically have that squeezy tube with a pump type aesthetic. Now, one thing that I did find very interesting in comparing these two is the pumps. The pumps are very different. This one is more of, I would say, a normal type foundation pump, whereas this one is a little different. And then the other thing that I found very interesting is the amount of product that you get. You get 48 mils of product in this, or 1.35 fluid ounces. You get 48 mils of product in the Peach Perfect. You actually get 1.6 fluid ounces of product, and everybody loved that about this foundation, was that you got so much when you purchased, way over the standard amount of 1 fluid ounce. So you would think that because you get so much product in here, and this is quite a significant amount less when it comes to product, this would probably be just a little bit cheaper, but you would be wrong. They're both $36. And what I find even more confusing is that the foundation they have that is only 1 fluid ounce, which is the least amount of the 3, is not the cheapest, it's the most expensive. This is actually $39, which is much more expensive than its 2 $36 sisters. So trying to figure out the rhyme and reason behind Too Faced and their price point is like trying to figure out an incredibly complicated puzzle that's missing a piece. It doesn't matter how hard you look at it, and ingredients and comparison, it's just not going to make any sense. I will say this, from an ingredients perspective, out of these 3 foundations, I'm most impressed with the ingredients list on the Do You foundation. Now, this particular foundation has ingredients that range from watermelon extract to cucumber extract, a lot of other different fruit and leaf extracts. It has ginkgo biloba extract in this, as well as glycerin, sodium hyaluronate, which is a form of hyaluronic acid, which is really, really good for that moisturizing effect that you want on your skin. It just has some really good few ingredients in the foundation formula, and the foundation formula is original to this foundation. There isn't another foundation out there that's like this particular foundation, which, based on recent videos, is a feat on its own, right? So in addition to having a really good formula with some really good ingredients, it's also infused with some vitamin C containing ingredients as well. So it goes a long way when it comes to those of us that really care about skin tone and brightening our skin. Now, one thing that I found really curious about this particular foundation is that typically when you talk about foundations that are very radiant in formula, you're usually talking about a sheer to medium finish, and usually it's more around that sheer with maybe the ability to build up to a medium finish, especially when you're talking about radiant or dewy finished foundations. There aren't a lot of really full coverage dewy foundations out there on the market, but this claims to be a full coverage, long wearing, radiant dewy foundation. So all of those claims actually really piqued my interest. And just so that you guys know, it is formulated without gluten or parabens, and this is a cruelty-free foundation. It is also vegan. Now, the shade that I got is Natural Beige, and I'll show you guys a swatch of it here so that you can take a look at the color and the consistency. Now, this really is a very gel cream type foundation. It claims that it's going to cover every flaw while creating a dewy, fresh, and luminous glow to the skin. It's going to claim that it claims that it's going to smooth, moisturize, and nourish your skin so that you have a flawless, fresh complexion that is like a 1 in a million glow. So it does have a lot of claims in there to kind of back up. The big four are long wearing, brightening, hydrating, dewy finish. So those are the big four main claims that they have when it comes to this foundation. So if you are somebody that is normal to dry, I would say this foundation is going to be the one for you. At least if you want to try it out, then I would definitely try it out. I am combo, so I tend to be very oily in my T-zone and a little dry on the perimeter of my face. So I am curious as to how this particular foundation was going to work in my T-zone, especially where I tend to be a little oily. Something about these ingredients and a dewy foundation just tells me it's probably not going to go over super well in areas of the face that are oily. So let's get into application first, just so that you guys can take a look at how this applied and what it looked like on the skin right after application. So I'm going to show you guys application a couple of different ways. On this day, I actually used a primer underneath. And as you can see, for a dewy finish foundation, this actually provides a significant amount of coverage, more than I thought that it would. I will say the radiance in the foundation does tend to emphasize texture a little bit, but that's with any radiant finish foundation. But overall, it does have a very natural skin finish, and this was with a smoothing primer underneath. So this was the finish after application on the first day, and it's one thin layer with a smoothing primer underneath. I mean, overall, the application itself, it doesn't settle into lines, and it looks fairly good, and it's not tacky. Alright, so this was the next time I wore it. Now, this was wearing it on its own with no primer underneath it at all. It is a little more radiant with no primer underneath it at all, especially the smoothing primer that I used previously was a little mattifying. So this is just the foundation on its own, and as you can see, it does have quite a glow to it, and this is one thin layer. Now here I built it up to a second layer. Didn't get a whole lot more coverage with a second layer, but it did get a little bit of additional coverage to it, but still really has that glow on its own with no primer at all. Alright, so far so good. Application went well. I will say that this is one of those rare formulas that typically I'll tell you guys that, you know, I prefer this foundation with a sponge. I prefer this foundation with a brush, but very rarely do I ever say, you know what, this foundation works best with either or. Usually a foundation will work fine with the sponge and the brush, but one of them will work just a little bit better depending on what formula it is. But with this particular foundation, genuinely, it works fine with a sponge or with a brush. I found that application using either one of those tools was fine. It did perfect. I will say, first impression, initial coverage is, I would classify this as, I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a full coverage foundation. It is a high, medium to low full coverage foundation. I think it's about as full coverage as I personally would want to go without completely blanking out the face so that there isn't like any dimension and you tend to look very flat and cakey. I think really heavily full coverage foundations tend to make the skin look a little fake because it's not letting any of your natural dimension or contour show through the foundation, and I don't think that this goes that far. So I'm kind of glad that it's not a 100% full coverage foundation. It is what I would consider to be a very high, medium, low full coverage foundation. It is in a place where I don't feel uncomfortable with the fact that Too Faced called it a full coverage foundation. I think that's fine, but it's not a 100% blank face full coverage foundation. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not that. You can build it up, but with more radiant formulas, the more that you build it up, the more potential you have for like slipping and sliding around to happen on the face. So I find that you can build up demi mattes or formulas that lean a little more matte. You can get away with building those up a little bit more, whereas radiant, kind of dewy type of formulas that contain a lot of glycerin in them, they do tend to slip and slide a lot around the face, and so the more that you pile on, the less it's going to adhere as much as you want it to, if any of that makes sense. I hope it does. So more radiant foundations, you don't want to just pile it on with 3 layers on the skin. That's probably not going to end up looking very cute. So with this one, you could do one thin layer and then do another thin layer. I probably wouldn't build it up any more than that, but honestly, after that, there really, I don't think would be a need to go past that point. So from a coverage perspective, I do think that it looks very nice. From a finish perspective, I was surprised that it wasn't as glowy as I thought it was going to be based on the ingredients list. Based on the ingredients list, I really thought that we were in for a really shiny, radiant finish, and that is not my favorite finish. I just don't like that look. I don't like that kind of wet look on the face, or to look like I have like greasy type face. It's not my favorite look, but I do like this type of a radiant finish foundation, which I would describe as like, I think it's a little more radiant than a demi matte, so I would put it square at a nice natural finish foundation. You're not overly radiant, you're not really matte, it's just a good natural finish foundation. However, they claim that the Born This Way foundation is a natural finish foundation, and I feel like that actually leans a little more to the matte side, whereas this is more of a true natural finish, leaning more to the radiant side type of foundation. So dewy finish, check. Hydrating, So here's the thing when it comes to hydrating. I actually do have several dry spots on my face where my skin is very dry and very flaky on the face, and I feel like this foundation didn't necessarily do anything to moisturize those areas on my face or hydrate those areas on my face. I really would have liked to have seen that out of this particular foundation. So on those areas of my face, there were days where I just skipped a moisturizer. I put a normal primer on, because if this is going to hydrate my face, then I want to let it do its job. So I would apply the foundation and really look to see if those areas that are kind of cracked and really dry on my face were moisturized, and they weren't really hydrated, if you know what I'm saying. They were still flaky after application. You could still kind of feel those dry patches where after I put moisturizer on my face, I can rub my finger over those areas and they don't feel dry and cracky, you know, they feel really hydrated. You know what your skin feels like when it's hydrated. So I wouldn't necessarily look to this foundation to be your hydration in your skincare. I would definitely go ahead and still moisturize. So if you have dry skin, don't depend on this foundation for your hydration. I don't think that it really fits the bill when it comes to hydration. I think it's a normal foundation. It just doesn't have any kind of moisturizing effects to it. However, I will say this, on those dry areas that I have on my face, I tend to struggle a little bit when it comes to demi-matte or matte foundations, because when I apply those foundations, it actually does the opposite. It overly dries out those areas, and those areas appear very cracked and flaky when I wear that type of a finish on those areas of my face. Now, the Do You foundation doesn't do that. It doesn't exacerbate those areas. It doesn't necessarily hydrate them and make them better, but it does not overemphasize dryness on the face like a matte formula will, which is nice. It doesn't overemphasize the dry areas that you have on the skin. Without getting into too much, let's go ahead and get into the wear test. Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in. We are about 5 hours in, and before the day got away from me, I wanted to sit down and take a look.
Previously on Amelia Farr. Maria.
Sorry. My tablet just kicked on. Alright, so. You know what, guys? I just got done eating a lot of Chinese food, so I really expected, because of the oil, for it to be pretty gone from like around here. And it is like a little bit. You can see like right here. But not bad though. Not bad at all. Still have like that glow going on. Like this up here is like highlighter. You can tell like where the highlighter is, like right here. But like this through here and like up here and here, that's the foundation. So all right, 5 hours, not too bad. All right guys, we are at 8 hours and I am tired. But we're gonna take a look at this foundation really quickly. All right, so it's coming off here, like right, I don't know if you guys can see it, like right in here. Like right here. So you can see like where I put concealer on the bridge of my nose. You see where all the foundation is gone, but the concealer is still there. So the foundation is gone off of my nose. The chin doesn't look too bad, although it is looking gone off of the chin. It is gone off of my forehead as well. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, through here. So it looks like we're good for about 8 hours. Honestly though, guys, it really did look pretty throughout the day. I started rolling up on that 8 hour mark, and that's when I really started kind of catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror here and there, and was like, ooh, the oils are starting to come through in my T-zone, and yeah, it's starting to fade. So I would call it on this one, I would say this one is about an 8 hour one. Alright guys, so here is our final shot right before we are going to take makeup off for the day. And at this point it's been 12 hours, so yeah, it's just gone. At this point, I think it's just gone for the most part. I mean, you can still see like a little bit here and there, but yeah, for the most part, it's just gone. So I would call it at around 8 hours with this one. Of course, as always, I always do my tests with just foundation on its own. So on its own, you're going to get a good 8 hours out of it. If you were to put some primer on underneath it and maybe a good setting spray, you could probably push it to the 10 hour mark, but probably not any further than that. I mean, but that's okay. I mean, it's good. It's good for a good 8 hours before it really starts to break down. Now, if you have dry skin, it may last a little bit longer on you. Because I have combo skin, the immediate breakdown happened in my T-zone. So, yeah. All right, we're going to wash the face now. So overall, you guys, I don't feel like this foundation was a miss. I really don't. I feel like this is a very decent foundation. It performed really well. It hung in there with me for around that kind of 8-hour mark, which for me is you get an 8-hour day out of a foundation, then you're doing good. If you get an 8-hour day out of a radiant foundation, you're doing really good. Radiant foundations tend to be very high maintenance. You do tend to need to touch those foundations up a little bit more throughout the course of the day as opposed to a matte foundation. Matte formulas just tend to be more longer wearing. They adhere to the skin much better. Radiant foundations, those are a little harder to keep on the skin. But this one actually does a really good job. When I stack this foundation up against other Radiant foundations that I have in my collection, it performs as good, if not better, than a lot of my other dewy finish foundations that I have. So that really is a fantastic thing. Now, if you really do the primer and the setting spray, you can really get a good 10-12 hours out of this foundation with minimal touch-ups in between, but you will get a solid 8 before anything really starts to show through, or you'll need to go in and touch up. And for me, I think that's a win with the ingredients that are in this particular foundation. I also think that's a win. I can honestly say I was going into this particular foundation expecting to be disappointed. They made a lot of claims. They had the cheesy packaging. It's Too Faced. I was like, this is gonna be interesting, but I was pleasantly surprised. This is a foundation that I would recommend to anybody that has normal to dry skin. If you are a combo girl like me, just make sure that you actually set your T-zone and then you moisturize the areas that are dry prior to putting on the foundation. Don't make this foundation your moisturizer. That is a common mistake that a lot of people do when they see that this is, it says on here that it's hydrating, so I don't have to moisturize. I can use this as my hydration for the day. Just don't do that. Don't depend on this as your hydration. While it doesn't emphasize dryness on the skin, it's not really a good moisturizer, so just remember that part. Other than that, I really like it, you guys. I think that we're gonna Erika approve this one. I think you guys will really enjoy it. If you're an oily girl, I would just avoid it altogether. Go with the Born This Way foundation or with the Peach Perfect foundation. This is a comfort matte formula and I think you'll enjoy it. And I actually really enjoy the Born This Way foundation as well. This is more of like a demi matte and this is more of like a matte. Again, back to the pricing. I don't know, you guys. It's so weird, you know? It's like the littlest one is the most expensive at $39. And then you would think this one would be more expensive because it has so much product in it. But it's not. They're both $36. So I think the $36 price point, though, for this particular foundation is a good price point. I mean, if you just look at it on its own without comparing her to her sisters in the collection, she does have 40 mils of product in here, guys. It is 1.35 fluid ounces, which is more product than you're going to get in a typical foundation. You're only going to get 1 fluid ounce of product out of it. So you are getting a lot of foundation and you don't really have to over apply this. So sometimes foundations will give you a lot of foundation because you have to use a lot of it to get it on your face and get any kind of coverage, but this isn't really like that. So yeah, it's definitely going to be, I think, a good value for you. Another thing that I wanted to mention about this particular foundation as well is that I've really enjoyed using this as a mixer. Now, I have a couple of foundations in my collection that can be just a little too matte for me or just a little too dry, and this foundation has really allowed me to explore those foundations and like a lot of them a little bit more. So I'll just get a normal little mixing palette like this here. This is just like a one that you can pick up for a nickel at Michael's, and I usually will just put a pump of this in here, and then whatever matte foundation I'm working with, I will put it in another pan, and then I'll take my beauty blender and I'll go into the matte foundation, and then I'll dip into the dewy foundation, and then I'll bounce it together in the middle to get it nice and mixed, and then apply it to the face. And if you guys just spend the nickel and get one of these little tin palettes, and it really makes mixing your products a lot of fun. And doing that with this particular foundation has proven to be very effective with a lot of the foundations that I own that have really shown themselves to be really dry, really like overly matte foundations, but there's something about them that I really like, whether it's the coverage that it offers or whatever it is. But I tend to shy away from them because they are really drying on the skin. This has really fixed that for a lot of the foundations that I have. Now, this is a dimethicone based foundation, so just make sure that when you're mixing and you're playing with your foundations, remember that dimethicone based foundations mix and water based foundations mix, but water and dimethicone foundations don't get along together. So most foundations out there tend to be dimethicone based unless otherwise specified that this is a water based product. So usually you're gonna find that they're dimethicone based foundations. So this is a great mixer for any kind of matte or demi matte foundation that you have that you feel like is just a little too drying on the skin. Put a pump or two of this with it and give it a try, and you'll really like it. Also, keep in mind, guys, when you're picking this product out, you are dealing with a product that's going to change color on you. So what that means is the color that it pumps out when it's wet is not indicative of the shade. You're not actually going to see the true shade of the foundation until after it's had an opportunity to dry on the skin, and then you will see the true color match of the foundation. So when you are swatching in store, make sure that you put a thin layer and then walk around the store for about 5 minutes and then take a look at that, whether you're doing it on the side of your face or the back of your hand, wherever it is that you're swatching this foundation. Don't make your color selection based on the wet product. Allow it to dry so that you can see the true shade of the foundation itself. So for me, the wet shade was a little light, but once it dried, it matched and was my perfect skin tone. So they do have a couple of undertones available in this particular collection. Unfortunately, this collection has the same lackluster shade range that the Peach Perfect collection had. So each of these have 20 shades to choose from. The new foundation, 20 shades to choose from. Now, if you're looking for a perfect spot-on shade match, then you may want to just go ahead and go with the Too Faced Born This Way. They actually have 35 shades. They've recently added to the shade range and expanded it out to 35 shades. So they actually have quite a good shade range in the Too Faced Born This Way formula. So if you're looking for a foundation that matches, or you feel like you're in between colors in the Peach Perfect or the Do You, then the Too Faced Born This Way should have a good color match for you. But unfortunately, this one only has 20 shades. And truthfully, the 20 shades that are available are a pretty good representation of shades out there. The first 10, I would say, range anywhere from fair all the way through to maybe a mid-tone medium, and then the last 10 shades are really in that darker medium all the way to the darkest dark shade. So it is a good split in between when it comes to those shades. It's not 20 shades with 3 dark colors. But there is that typical, is the lightest one really going to fit all of my fair girls out there? And I have the same concern over, is the darkest one going to fit all of my dark girls out there? So I don't know. I don't think the lightest goes light enough, and I don't think that the darkest goes dark enough. But it is a good representation of kind of the middle shade range. Alright guys, so that is it. That wraps up this review. So overall, I think the Do You foundation is a hit from Too Faced. Congratulations guys, this one is Erika approved. Good job, Too Faced. Don't forget, guys, we have the Vault Collection giveaway happening. We are going to be making the announcement next week on who the winner is. If you want to know when the live stream is happening, make sure that you are following my Instagram at ErikaApproved. That is where it's going to be announced. And yeah, I'm really excited because I love doing live streams with you guys. I love it when the gang is all here and we can all chit chat and hang out and celebrate with the winner. And this is a pretty big giveaway. I'm really excited about it. Somebody's going to get the whole Vault collection, and I think that is fabulous. All right, gang, I hope everybody is very happy and very healthy, and I will see you guys probably in the live stream.